you girls for that great introduction. Fantastic. I loved it. But let's go ahead and jump headfirst into what bet that I made with my B period today. B period was killing it so well today in class that I promised a bunch of y'all that I would keep this flip under 10 minutes, right? So we left off in class talking today about classical Athens and the birth of Periclean Athens. We talked about Pericles and all of his reforms, how he rebuilt the Parthenon, rebuilt that statue of Athena out of ivory and gold, how he gave free theater seats to the poor, got government workers paid. Make sure you study those Periclean reforms going into this test, right? Now, another big thing that's going on in the background of Athens, while Pericles is alive, while he's doing all these reforms, is the growth and birth of Western philosophy, right? What philosophy is, and its birth in classical Athens, is going to relate most of this word philosopher, right? What a philosopher is a lover of wisdom, right? Philosophers are going to be these people that start to grow out of classical Athens that are going to try to figure out ways to answer questions for some reason no one in society can answer, right? Philosophers are going to begin to turn away from the myths about Zeus and all the gods and things like that and try to answer questions like, what's the meaning of life? How do I understand everything better? What do I really know? Do we really know anything for sure, right? And the very first guy out of the big three philosophers is this dude right here, Socrates, right? Socrates is going to be the very first philosopher that comes along and who's going to buck against the system, begin to turn away from the myths, and try to answer those really hard questions about what is the meaning of life? Is there such a thing as good and evil? What is the concept of good and evil? How do we understand the world around us? And Socrates is an interesting figure because he was born extremely poor, right? And he never wrote anything down. It's a very, very interesting figure because he never actually wrote anything down whatsoever. And we only understand who Socrates is because of his student that we'll actually be talking about next, right? Born very, very poor, taught everything for free in the agora. He would literally just exist in the agora and teach anybody that would come along anything he possibly could, right? Fun facts as well, though, is he kind of talked a lot of junk about Athens during this entire time period because he literally would constantly talk about how he thought that democracy was a terrible idea, right? Socrates, in all of his guidance and understanding, believed that democracy was a bad idea because people aren't smart enough to know how to vote, right? The big thing going into it that I find really interesting about Socrates is he loves to poke fun at people, right? Loves to poke fun at people, and he loves to see how smart you think you really are, right? And that's where he came up with his method known as the Socratic method. The Socratic method is a conceptual method where you do nothing but relentlessly ask people questions, right? You ask them questions to help them realize their own ignorance. I'm sure for a fact that during our review session on Monday, I'll Socratic method one of y'all, right? I'll ask you a bunch of questions. I'll see what you think you really know and things like that. And we'll actually understand this big guiding quote that Socrates always went by. He said, "All I know is that I know nothing." And he's not saying that he's dumb. He's saying all I know is that I don't really know anything for sure. That we're living in a society where we have to use our minds to try and understand the world around us, and we're doing our absolute best, right? And the big reason why he didn't like democracy is because he didn't like the concept of fanaticism. Socrates thought that anybody could sell anybody an idea, right? He thought that if me, Mr. Terry, was running for public office at Chappelle, that I could probably convince you that I'm a good person, even though I'm not. And that it would be pretty easy to do that to people by trying to talk above you and using my intelligence to try and sway you towards my way, right? And he said this, and he kept poking fun at the government, and this is going to stir up a lot of trouble. It's going to earn him a nickname, and they're going to be calling him the gadfly of Athens. And what a gadfly is an annoying bug that won't stop bothering you, right? And so the Athenian government is going to get together in their democratic value and decide to put Socrates on trial, right? They put Socrates on trial, and they say that he is corrupting the youth of Athens, and they decide to put him to death, right? And Socrates actually has to kill himself in this death sentence, and he is forced to drink a poison hemlock potion. Hemlock is a root that grows near a riverbank, and he had to drink it, and it ended up killing him, right? And so the thing about it is he was put to death because of his annoying questions, right? Because he wouldn't stop questioning everything. But it's okay, because we know so much about Socrates because of this guy sitting right there, right? His main student, and the second out of the big three philosophers, a man by the name of Plato, right? His main guy, his main student, oh geez, that's big. All right, so his main student, that of Plato. Now, Plato is an interesting figure because he's a lot different from Socrates. He's actually a very prolific writer. He wrote 36 different books, including books like The Republic, Symposium, and all of his other major works. And he had a lot more guiding ideas that were laid out in paper than Socrates did. He learned from Socrates to question everything about society and try to understand everything better, but the big thing that he came down to in many of his concepts was that everyone needed to think more. That if we think more as a society and we try to answer these really, really hard, tough questions in society as much as possible, everyone will be better off, right? He believed that society needs to be full of more intelligent thinkers and that we need to work to educate as many people as possible, right? And this is a concept known as rationalism, using your mind and logic to try and answer just about any question that you can come down with. Why is the world the way that it is? What is the perfect friend? What is the perfect lover? What is beauty? Why is art amazing? And why do human beings love it, right? How should we fix society? Interesting little factor about it as well is he also didn't like democracy. He thought democracy was a bad idea as well because he thought that people, just like Socrates, were being preyed upon by the few intelligent that could kind of sell them a really, really bad idea, right? But he believed that lovers and friends should be challenging you to be the best person you can be. He believed that human beings loved the beauty of art because we wanted to see the best parts of society, right? And he also believed the best way to fix society was to educate as many people as possible, right? Now, this philosopher is very important because he's going to open a massive academy in Athens, right? And this right here is an artistic representation of that academy. This is actually done by Raphael during the Renaissance period, over 1,000 years after Plato had already died, right? And this painting, though, is set in Plato's academy because he is Plato right there, and another famous student we'll talk about here in a second, and all these people surrounding him are philosophers from his era. They also all exist in different time periods and things like that, but he believed that by educating society, we'll make everybody better off, right? He also had other really, really cool opinions about like where everything in the world has come from, right? So in the theory of forms, he actually tried to come up with the concept of like, why are we here? Where did everything come from? And he actually believed that there was this separate dimension where there were perfect versions of everything, right? So we'll use this example really quick. Come here, puppy. Come here, Pee-Pee. Pee-Pee, come. Pee-Pee, come. You're wasting my time. Come here. I gotta do this in 10 minutes. So in theory of forms, Plato believed that there were two dimensions. There was the ideal universe and the real universe. And in the ideal universe, there is the mold of a perfect dog, right? And the mold of the perfect dog is there. And it's the reason why dogs exist on this plane. And he believed, in a nutshell, that all other dogs were based off that perfect one, right? And this is that perfect dog. This is Pee-Pee. And this is Pierre, and I love him very much. Now, the big thing about it, though, in general, is Plato is going to promote this concept of rationalism and using your mind to think things out. But what we'll do, actually, in class before your test, we'll review the theory of forms, and I'll talk about the allegory of the cave a little bit, just so you have a better understanding of it, and so you can answer that Plato question that's on the test a little bit better, right? But the big thing you need to understand about Plato is this very famous quote, "Know thyself," right? Introspect, look inward, try to figure out how to be the best version of yourself that you possibly can be, right? And by doing that, you will become educated like many other people around him. Now, this is another famous figure, though. This is Aristotle, right? This is the last out of the big three philosophers. And Aristotle is a very interesting figure. First of all, he's a little bit different from Socrates and Plato. He's not from Athens originally. He was actually born in a place called Macedonia, which is actually North Greece. Son to a doctor, right? Even though doctors were like a little bit of a different situation from this whole thing. But he's a son to a doctor, and his first major job was tutoring a famous figure by the name of Alexander the Great. And we'll talk about Alexander the Great in the next unit. But he moved to Athens, where he would work with Plato in Plato's Academy and begin to create a lot of his own works. But Aristotle is very different from Plato, because Plato was a rationalist. He thought that you could use your mind to understand just about anything. Aristotle believed you need to observe everything, right? He believed that we will learn by looking and observing, and we will learn by doing, right? And so many ideas he came up with, or so many that we really can't even count them all. He had ideas and perceptions about everything. Now, granted, a bunch of them are actually not correct, but he studied everything, from art to friendships to the elements. He actually believed that there were 4 key elements that made up the world: fire, earth, air, and water. Now, we know that there are a lot more elements now, but at least he's going to propagate the idea of there being elemental structure. That's a good thing, right? He also created rhetoric styles, which he tried to show people how to write effectively. And you'll probably talk about this with Miss Savoy at some point this year, about using ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos meaning ethics, logos meaning logic, and pathos meaning compassion or passionate expression in your writing to convince people of things. But he also believed I believe that his biggest contribution is empirical study. Aristotle is different from Plato because Aristotle believed that if you observe something, you'll learn it, right? Why does the sun go up and down? Where is the Earth's place in the universe? How do these elements play into society? He said, learn by doing. And Aristotle's ideas are going to be the leading understanding of the scientific method, which y'all did in that awesome lab with Miss Merrill when y'all made your dinosaur sponges and stuff like that. But we'll talk a little bit more about Aristotle when I see you in class right before the test, and I'll give you a couple ways to remember him, all right? But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.